Right now, your home is warm. You did nothing to earn that warmth. A thermostat somewhere is quietly handling it. There is food in your fridge that will still be there next week, no matter what the weather does. There is a coat by your door you bought from a store. None of this required you to risk your life. Now take every single one of those things away. Just your body, just your skin. And outside, not a winter afternoon. A real ice age. Temperatures that was extremely harsh. Ice sheets covering entire continents. This was the reality your ancestors lived in for hundreds of thousands of years. And somehow they survived it. You are the proof of that. Every ancestor in your line made it through at least one brutal winter alive. So how exactly did they do it? How does a species built for African heat survive the coldest conditions this planet ever produced? That is the story. And it is one of the most remarkable things humans have ever done. Let us be honest about what they were actually facing. Because calling it winter makes it sound manageable. It was not. The peak of the last ice age hit roughly 26,000 to 19,000 years ago. Ice sheets sat on top of Europe, Asia, and North America. The land was flat and frozen and wide open with nothing to stop the wind. Trees were scarce, food disappeared for months, and the human body is simply not built for any of that. We come from hot places. Our biology still reflects that. No thick fur, no insulating fat layer, no ability to hibernate. Strip away clothing in real cold and the human body has hours before it shuts down. The animals around our ancestors were made for exactly these conditions. Mammoths had fur and thick fat. Cave bears could hibernate. Reindeer could walk to warmer places. Humans had none of those options. By pure biology, we should have been among the first most affected when the temperature dropped. We had the wrong body. We were in the wrong place. And the timing could not have been worse. But we had something none of those animals had. A brain that could solve problems. And hands that could build what the body was missing. What saved us was not one single thing. It was a whole collection of solutions, each one fixing a problem that would otherwise have been fatal. And it started with fire. Everything else depends on fire. So that is where the story begins. Humans had been using fire for at least 300,000 to 400,000 years before the worst of the Ice Age. By the time temperatures hit their lowest, fire was the entire foundation of survival. When archaeologists dug up Ice Age fire sites in Ukraine, they expected rough, crude hearths. Instead, they found carefully engineered fireplaces. One of them had burned at over 600 degrees Celsius. When wood ran low on the frozen landscape, they did not give up. They burned fat and bone instead. Fire gave them heat, it cooked their food, it hardened their tools, and in a winter where the sun barely appeared, fire added critical hours of light and warmth. But fire has a problem. You cannot take it with you. The moment you step away from it, the cold is immediately back. So ancient humans solved this the only way available to them. They took warmth off other animals and put it on themselves. The earliest version was simple. Animal skins thrown over the shoulders. We have evidence of humans skinning bears for their fur 300,000 years ago. Cut marks on ancient bear paw bones, right where you would cut to cleanly remove a hide. Those bear skins became heavy wind-resistant cloaks. But a loose skin thrown over the shoulders loses heat through every gap, and that is not enough for real Ice Age conditions. The real breakthrough came around 30,000 years ago, and it was tiny. A sewing needle. A thin sliver of bone with a small hole at one end. One archaeologist called it possibly the most important invention in all of human history. The needle meant fitted clothing, sealed seams, sleeves that closed at the wrist. The difference between a blanket on your shoulders and a coat that fits is enormous. And that difference is the sewing needle. They did not stop at fur either. Deer hide was cut into mittens and waterproof boots. Before heading into the cold, hunters rubbed animal fat across exposed face and neck. Tallow sealed the skin against the wind and held warmth in. Simple, effective, Ice Age lip balm and thermal layer in one. And here is something most people never think about. Out on open snow, there is another threat that has nothing to do with temperature. Snow blindness, the reflected glare off white snow, can genuinely damage your vision. Ancient hunters in the far north carved thin horizontal slits into flat pieces of bone or wood, and tied them over their eyes. The world's first sunglasses, carved from bone, tens of thousands of years before the modern version. The image of Ice Age people hiding in deep caves is not quite accurate. Many did not have caves. In Ukraine and Russia, the landscape is open and flat. No caves, almost no trees. What they did have was mammoth bones, and they built with them. At a site called Mazirik, researchers found circular houses made almost entirely from mammoth bones. Large skulls and leg bones set into the ground form the base. Ribs and curved tusks stacked to form the frame. Each structure used hundreds of bones. The frame was covered with hides packed with moss and sealed with earth. The largest is around 18,000 years old. Right at the coldest point of the Ice Age, the site shows evidence of repeated occupation across hundreds of years. These people were not hiding in caves. They were engineers. They took the biggest animals on Earth and built homes out of them. The shelters were also cleverly designed in ways easy to underestimate. Many featured a cold trap entrance. The doorway was dug lower than the floor of the living space. Cold air is heavy, so it sank into the entrance pit and stayed there, while warm air rose up to where the family slept. basic physics, figured out and built into homes before anyone wrote down how it works. They also knew something about snow that seems backwards until you think about it. Snow is actually an excellent insulator. Pile enough around a shelter and the interior stays near very cold even when outside drops to 30 below. People knew this long before the igloo was perfected. Staying warm keeps you alive tonight. But winter has a slower and more patient killer, hunger. For months there was almost nothing to gather and little to hunt, so they became very good at preparing ahead. When a large animal was taken down, the whole thing was used. The cold did part of the work, very cold meat naturally, so it kept longer. They smoked meat and dried it into strips. Food was stored in pits dug into the ground where the earth stayed cold all winter. There is evidence they submerged mammoth meat in cold ponds to keep it fresh, using the water the way we use a refrigerator. None of this required electricity or equipment that could break, and they wasted almost nothing. Every part of an animal was used: fat for fuel, bone for tools and shelter, hide for clothing, sinew for thread. The hunting itself was also organized and strategic. At a site in eastern France near a tall limestone cliff, Ice Age hunters drove herds toward the edge, using fire and coordinated group tactics to use the landscape as a natural trap. This was not occasional improvisation. The same location was used for tens of thousands of years. Kill large, preserve everything. Store enough to last the winter. That plan is most of the reason the species made it through. But here is something easy to overlook in the survival story. These people expected winter. Their entire year was structured around preparing for it. We are the ones who get surprised by bad weather. We assume the power will come back on. They never assumed anything. A huge portion of every year was dedicated to being ready, and they did not face it alone. People lived in close groups under shared roofs. Many more individuals crowded into much smaller spaces than we would accept today. That was deliberate. Body heat from multiple people in an insulated space is a genuine heat source. Isolation in winter meant exposure and early danger. It was almost always the people living alone who struggled most in a harsh cold spell. Then there is the most extreme physical adaptation. The Yagan people at the southern tip of South America lived in extreme cold, wearing almost no clothing. Their bodies simply ran hotter. They generated more internal heat than the average human, and rested in a deep squat that tucked limbs inward and reduced heat loss. Their answer to the cold was not external, it was biological. Their bodies changed to meet the conditions. And then there is the strangest possibility of all. At a Spanish site called the Pit of Bones, scientists examined ancient human bones from 430,000 years ago. The damage patterns inside those bones were unusual, growth that stopped and started in cycles, signs of prolonged sun deprivation, nutritional markers that match what you see in animals that hibernate. The scientists proposed that these ancient humans may have slowed their bodies into extended dormancy, the way a bear does. Serious researchers still debate this. It has not been settled. But the evidence is strange enough that it cannot simply be dismissed. Your ancestors sleeping through winter like bears is not something we can just wave away. For hundreds of thousands of years, surviving to spring was never certain. Every winter was a test with real consequences for failure, and then in the span of a few thousand years, which is almost nothing on this timescale. We went from building houses out of mammoth bones to adjusting a thermostat. The most lethal thing your ancestors ever faced is now something most of us experience through a window from inside a heated room. We beat winter so completely, and so recently, that most of us forgot it was ever a war we were fighting. Your ancestors built homes from the large animal bones, invented clothing from scratch, developed food preservation without refrigeration. They used position and landscape to block wind. A group of trees blocks an enormous amount of wind, and packed gaps with moss, mud, and pine pitch to seal every draft. Sticky tree sap that sealed everything tight and kept the wind out. Sometimes the solutions came from where you would least expect. In the worst medieval winters in Europe and Russia, peasants brought livestock inside. Cows and sheep inside the ground floor of the house. The animals gave off enormous amounts of heat that rose up and warmed the family above. You basically lived on top of your own furnace, and the furnace was a cow. Some groups also used their own bodies as precision instruments for cold survival, sleeping in specific huddle formations to share body heat most efficiently, covering the entrance with multiple layers of hide to create an airlock effect. The planning and preparation for winter was never an afterthought. It was the central organizing principle of the entire year. We are the only species that can plan years ahead for a threat not yet arrived. That ability to anticipate and prepare is as important as fire or clothing. Without it, all the best tools in the world would not have been enough. The complete picture of how humans survived Ice Age winters is remarkable. Not one thing, a whole interconnected system of solutions. And now here's the part that actually gets me. In a couple thousand years, which is nothing on this timeline, we went from stacking mammoth bones into a house to tapping a button for heat. The deadliest thing our ancestors ever faced is now something we complain about on the walk to a warm car. We beat winter so completely that most people forgot it was ever a war we were losing. But for hundreds of thousands of years, making it to spring was the whole game. Every winter a genuine test. Every spring a genuine victory. and every human alive today is the result of ancestors who passed that test. Every single one of them. So the next time you tap your thermostat or pull on a coat you bought from a store, remember that your ancestors built the same warmth from scratch, from animal bones and sewing needles and fire in each other, with no manual, no electricity, no backup plan. They figured it out because they had to, and every solution they found was passed forward to the next generation until it reached you, warm, safe, comfortable, because they were not. That is the deal every generation makes with the next one. Subscribe to Ancivex, a new ancient history video every 2 days.